We live in an age obsessed with power, status, influence, visibility, yet beneath that hunger lies a paradox. We seek to rule, but we cannot govern ourselves. The modern man builds his empire on shifting sand, craving external control while internally fractured. Carl Jung would argue that this is not merely a social crisis, but a symbolic one. We have exiled the archetype of the king from the psyche. No longer is power seen as a sacred duty, but as a means of validation. As a result, many wear crowns made of noise and ambition, but inside, there is no ruler to guide the realm. Only confusion, dressed as confidence. The king, in Jungian psychology, is not a political figure, but a psychic center, a living metaphor for inner authority, balance, and purpose. He is the force that gives structure to chaos, vision to instinct, and direction to the fragmented self. Without him, we are ruled by inner warlords, our fears, our compulsions, our wounds. This video is not about becoming a king over others. It is about crowning the self, restoring sovereignty where there is emotional anarchy, and learning how to wield responsibility with clarity. Jung believed that only through integration of this inner king can true power emerge, one that creates, protects, and sustains, rather than dominates and destroys. Section 1. Order, vision, and authority. There is a figure within you, not physical but psychological, who rules your internal world. Jung called it the king archetype, and it has less to do with dominance and more to do with inner governance. The king is that part of the psyche responsible for vision, order, and integration. He holds the map of your life, organizes your priorities, and decides what is sacred. A man or woman with an active king archetype knows where they are going and why. The king doesn't panic when emotions rise. He doesn't vanish when chaos knocks. Instead, he builds structure through clarity and commands loyalty from the scattered parts of the self. Without him, your psyche becomes a court with no ruler, where the jester of impulse, the assassin of shame, and the merchant of distraction all fight for power. The king does not silence these parts. He listens, then decides. He leads by holding the center firm. You've seen this figure before, not only in dreams or imagination, but in stories that speak across cultures. King Arthur, seated at the round table, offered more than justice. He offered balance, a kingdom in which no voice dominated, but all had place. Mufasa, from The Lion King, is not just a parent, but a symbol of generational responsibility, calling the next ruler to remember who they are, and the legend of the Fisher King reveals what happens when the inner king is wounded, the entire land withers. These myths endure because they mirror psychological truths. When your inner king is asleep, your energy disperses, your focus fades, your purpose becomes reactive, not chosen. And when that happens, the kingdom of your mind becomes vulnerable to attack, not from outside, but from within. But not all rulers are wise. Some wear the crown with fear, some with pride, and others, unconsciously, become tyrants or cowards. Section 2. False authority. Not every king brings balance. When the archetype of rulership is not integrated with awareness, it descends into its shadow forms, distortions of leadership that fracture the psyche rather than unify it. Jung observed that power, when unconscious, either inflates or collapses. One shadow is the tyrant king, a ruler obsessed with control, who silences dissent and punishes vulnerability. In the psychological realm, this manifests as the person who dominates relationships, micromanages outcomes, and reacts violently to perceived disrespect. What they call strength is often an armored defense against shame. Beneath the crown of the tyrant is a terrified child, gripping authority as a shield. They rule with rage because they've never ruled their inner world with compassion, and so their kingdom, the mind, the body, their relationships, remains a realm built not on purpose, but on fear of collapse. The other extreme is subtler but equally corrosive. The weak king, who abdicates the throne entirely, he is not cruel, but absent. He avoids conflict, rejects responsibility, and appeases others at the expense of inner truth. Where the tyrant forces submission, the weak king seeks approval. In practice, this shows up as chronic people-pleasing, indecision, and the inability to set boundaries. They seem kind, but their kindness is hollow, because it is not rooted in conviction, only in the hope of staying liked. The weak king may speak of peace, but internally he hosts a civil war. Without an active king archetype to organize their life, their psyche is ruled by every voice but their own. Guilt, anxiety, external expectations. They live not from sovereignty but from survival, hoping that compliance will be rewarded with safety. When the king within is wounded, people stop ruling themselves and start outsourcing their authority. They turn lovers into saviors. They idolize influencers, politicians, or spiritual figures, anyone who promises vision, certainty, or protection. This is projection of the crown, the psychological act of handing your power to someone else because you haven't claimed it inside yourself. The result is dependency, hero worship, rebellion, or blind obedience. Jung warned that a society full of unintegrated individuals would always produce either tyrants to follow or victims waiting to be rescued. The more you fear stepping into your authority, the more seductive it becomes to kneel to someone who seems to have theirs. But no one can crown you except you. So the question becomes, how do you rise to the throne without becoming either cruel or weak? Section 3. Crowning the Self. The true king does not conquer nations, he brings order to the battlefield within. Jung called this the process of individuation, the lifelong path of becoming whole, where every disowned trait is acknowledged, every shadow integrated, and every impulse examined without shame. Rulership begins not with assertion, but with inner listening. You must ask, what parts of you have been banished from the throne? The anger you repress, the desires you shame, the voice you silence. These are not enemies, they are messengers. Until you face them, they rule in secret. The individuated king is not a master of perfection, but of balance. He doesn't seek power for validation. He aligns his strength with purpose. Through ritual, reflection, and radical honesty, he becomes sovereign. He no longer chases approval or fears abandonment, because he leads from a center that cannot be outsourced. To embody this sovereignty, you need structure. Not externally imposed, but internally chosen. Begin with stillness. Journal not what you did today, but what drove your choices. Was it fear, ego, obligation? Then bring discipline to your thoughts like a ruler surveying his court. Choose values that do not shift with the winds of opinion. Practice saying no without guilt and yes without justification. This is emotional sovereignty. Not control over others, but command over your own reactions. The more you act in alignment with your inner truth, the less you are pulled by outer chaos. You stop being a subject to every emotional storm and become a center of gravity for others, not by force, by presence. Because when power meets self-acknowledge, something rare happens. You no longer need a crown for others to follow. You become the mountain they orient themselves around.